In this video, I'm going to talk about how much wedding invitations should cost, and I want to just preface this by saying wedding invitations should cost whatever you're comfortable with. There are so many different options that we could really go from zero to like infinity. The sky's the limit. There's not really an upper limit, but I'm going to give you some realistic expectations and also explain like what goes into the cost of wedding invitations and what you can do to cut that cost down if you're interested, or what you're paying for if you are splurging a little bit. Hi, I'm Laney. I'm a wedding invitation designer. I love to teach people how to design wedding invitations and all about wedding invitations. If you are interested in becoming a designer, check out our membership stationery school in the description. If you're just here to learn about stationery, we have a ton of other videos here on the channel that will help you with your wedding invitations. When it comes to the cost of your wedding invitations, I want to dispel two myths that are very popular. And I also just want to repeat, I'm going to say this so many times, do what you are comfortable with and what works for you. I'm an invitation designer, so obviously this is really important to me, but I'm never judging anyone or trying to trick anyone into spending more money than they're comfortable with. I just want to give you an idea of what is realistic and what you are paying for with wedding invitations. So the first myth is that everyone in the wedding world is trying to trick you into spending more money, and that if you say it's not a wedding, it's not going to cost as much. I don't think this is true for any vendor, but especially for wedding invitations, like we charge by what you want. So I definitely will charge just as much or more for a birthday party invitation if you need as much as you need for a wedding invitation. You're probably gonna see most shower invitations, birthday party invitations, etc. are a little bit less expensive, but in the same way, save the dates are less expensive than invitations because they just have fewer pieces and typically are less involved. So I just wanna quickly dispel that rumor and tell you that no one I know is actually trying to trick anyone, and no one I know will charge you less if you say it's not a wedding, as long as you're honest about the pieces and the quantity and everything else that you need. The second myth is that invitations are just going to end up in the trash. Sure, maybe they will, maybe it's actually true, but I would ask you to think a little beyond this, like where does the food end up? We love to joke, in the toilet. But also, if you've ever looked at anyone's fridge, you see wedding invitations all the time. My friends still have invitations from my wedding that I sent out in 2019. So I just want to encourage you to remember that wedding invitations are the only things your guests are seeing throughout this entire year. You're living in this wedding, you're making all these decisions and living in it all the time, but they are not. And the only thing they've seen is your stationery. So if you're thinking about it as something that just ends up in the trash, of course, you're not really going to value it. And in that case, like Evites are really amazing. They've come a long way. There's a lot of great systems to use them. People are really comfortable with the internet these days. You can also do things like online RSVPs, which is kind of a hybrid approach, even with a physical invitation. And you can use a lot of places that are not going to charge you as much for invitations, or design something yourself for a lot cheaper than if you were to pay someone else to design it. So that brings me to what are the things that are affecting the cost of your wedding invitations and how much should you really expect to pay. So if you are comfortable with graphic design and you're interested in designing them and you want to print them out yourself, you're probably going to find like invitation and RSVP card you can print at 50 to 100 quantity for about $1 each if you're comfortable with the design. It just depends on exactly which paper you want, what type of printing, but if you're going to do flat printing and you're willing to do the design and make sure all the specs are correct for that, then you'll probably pay about $1 each. Envelopes that are colored and nice are going to be anywhere between like 50 cents and $1 each. And then if you want to put in any embellishments, that will add to the cost, of course. But if we're talking like just to print a wedding invitation, I typically pay about 50 cents per card to just physically flat print an invitation. Now, if you're not comfortable with graphic design, you can purchase a pre-made template from some shops. Someday Paper Co. is one that I really love on Etsy. I'm working on getting some templates up in my Etsy shop as well, though they're not ready yet at the time of filming this video. So there's a lot of good templates you can get out there for $10, $15, $20, and then you can fill that in, and then you'll just have to pay for the printing. So kind of what I previously had quoted for that. The next level up is going to be pre-designed suites. So this is like Minted, where you just go on and fill in your information and print it. You'll pick a design that's out there, you'll include your edits, and then you'll order it to be printed. There's not a lot of human involvement here, so you're not paying for someone's time. You're just paying mostly for the printing and a little bit of the rights to the design. So those you can expect to pay. I think the last time I checked, Minted was about $200 for 100, so probably about $2 each. And And then of course that can depend on whether you also order address printing, any embellishments, envelope liners, etc. The next step up is going to be semi-custom design, and a lot of these start with a predetermined layout or basic design concept. There's a lot of different levels here, and you'll get that human interaction. So for instance, I have semi-custom designs in my Etsy shop. You pick a design, but we can change the colors, we can change the layout, we can change the fonts, we can do a little bit more than you can do on something like on a site like Minted or with a template, but you are also going to get a little bit of that hand-holding if you just prefer that. So some people don't change anything, but they just like the personal interaction, and some people change a lot of things, and that's something that they wouldn't be able to do on Minted, but they still like to see kind of an idea of what they're purchasing before they purchase. So they like to have that predetermined layout or style that they're seeing from the semi-custom collection. Mine, like a 4-piece suite, which is invite, RSVP card, and 2 envelopes, start at $5 each, but then if you add a details card and envelope liner, those are $7.40 each. So if you have 100 of those, that's kind of in the $500 to $750 range. If you want to add customizations, that can go up even further if you want to add address printing, etc. I would say semi-custom suites, really you should expect to pay anywhere from like $500 up to $2,000, maybe even $3,000, depending on exactly what you want to add on, because some people do offer letterpress printing, foil stamping, embellishments like ribbons, wax seals, custom venue drawings, etc. So you can start on the lower end if you don't want some of those customizations, but then if you want to add on some things that take time or physically cost money, then those are going to increase the cost of those, of course. Lastly, you have fully custom design. My minimum right now is $3,500. You can really do custom design all the way up. Some people have minimums of $8,000 to $10,000. I would say on the lower end, you can expect to pay $3,000 to $6,000, and then it just kind of depends on exactly what you want, because those are fully custom designs that no one has ever seen before. They're created exactly for you. This would include like, fully custom maps that are in watercolor, fully custom portraits, your pet portraits, etc. So when it comes to wedding invitation design, you're paying for, really, there's like 4 main things that influence the cost. And so the first is going to be time. So that's what you've seen as this scale. So if you're buying a template, I don't have to spend any of my time on that. So you're not paying a premium for that. However, if you want a custom design, I'm investing like 15 hours or so into each custom design suite. So of course I'm going to have to charge for that. And then there's that semi-custom, which is kind of in the middle, and your pricing is going to depend on how much time you're asking the designer to spend. So time is just such a big factor, and this is where, our time is valuable. We only have a limited amount of it. We have this expertise in design or drawing or calligraphy or painting or whatever it is, and that's kind of what you're paying for in that case. The second thing you're paying for is quantity a little bit. So if you have 200 invitations, it's obviously going to cost more than 50, especially if there's any level of assembly that's involved. So for me to put together 50 invitations might take an hour, but 200 might take 4 hours. And it just depends. The more embellishments you add on, the more the quantity is going to affect that. So in addition to time and quantity, you're paying for like paper and print methods. So this is just kind of the luxury level. If you're paying for regular, smooth 100-pound cardstock, it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you're paying for handmade paper with those beautiful deckled edges, for instance. And then if you're paying for digital printing, it's going to be a lot more cost effective than gold foil stamping or letterpress printing, or there's so many other print methods. I have another video on print methods and also one on paper that I can link for you. In general, there's a lot that can be done with digital printing that's very, very beautiful, and that's going to be the most cost effective option. And then the fourth thing that will really change the pricing a lot is your embellishments and the level of assembly on those. So if you order wax seals, those just cost money and also require ordering, design, expertise, etc. So you will have to pay for those. If you want me to put the wax seals on the invitations or make them for you, that's going to cost more than if you don't. A lot of designers will have a standard level of assembly, and some of them might let you do some of the assembly yourself if you do have a little DIY spirit and you want to. Some designers won't let you do that because they just want to guarantee you have this like wonderful luxury white glove experience and that you get the best product at the end. So you can always ask your designer if your assembly, you could do any of it yourself. However, I do want to caution you that these are things that we've learned for a long time. We have tools that are available to us. So some of the things are not quite as easy as they seem, but I definitely have worked with clients in the past who love to do DIY and crafting and wanted to have that piece of their suite as something that they did themselves and have done a beautiful job. So if you are trying to save costs, I'm going to give you a few tips here. I would stick with digital printing. I would try to cut down on the number of pieces. So maybe doing online RSVPs, because that's going to cut down on the envelope for that, the stamp cost for that, and then any sort of printing. Address printing versus calligraphy, or you could get an address stamp and stamp them yourselves, or you could address yourself. I don't love offering addressing yourself because it's just honestly worth the money not to do it. In a lot of cases, it's a lot of work, especially if you have like 200 invitations. Another thing is to make sure you get your count correct. So sometimes people confuse the guest count and the invite count. So if you want to have 200 people at your wedding, you're probably only sending, 150, 120 or so invites, depending on how many people are in couples, families, single, etc. But just make sure you're not ordering an invitation for each individual guest, because a lot of them are going to get the same invitation and be on the same page. I've had that happen, and it just breaks my heart when we find out too late. So try to make sure you have the appropriate household count as opposed to the total guest count. Another thing you can do to cut down on cost is printing on the back of cards. I wouldn't recommend printing on the back of your invitation, but for instance, if you want a map and then you have a details card, putting those together is a great option. If you want to put a QR code on the back of your RSVP card to get to your website or something, these are really great options. And then of course, when you're cutting down, consider your postage costs. So anything that adds like a bump, so a wax seal or a ribbon that's gonna have like a tie, that will require more postage. Anything that adds additional weight or heft or thickness, if they can't bend the invitation over the edge of the counter, then that's going to have to go as parcel. So you wanna not do like every single card as double thick unless you're willing to pay that parcel rate for every invitation. And then lastly, the biggest thing you can do to cut down on cost is just cut down on the time that someone has to work with you individually. So if fully custom is maybe out of your budget, you might want to look into a semi-custom option where you can choose something, you can change up the colors and the fonts, and maybe you have the budget for a custom venue drawing or pet portrait, but you don't have the budget for the fully custom suite. And a lot of designers have beautiful, beautiful semi-custom options that you can mix and match to help you cut costs, but still create something that feels unique to you. I hope this video was helpful in understanding kind of what goes into the cost of wedding invitations and why they may cost what they do. There's a lot of different options and logistics, and sometimes just changing one tiny thing means that a lot of stuff on the back end has to change. So I want to just encourage you to assume that if you're working with someone, they are doing the best by you. They're not trying to trick you or price gouge you or anything else. There just might be a lot of logistic stuff going on in the background that you don't understand. And the best way to talk to them about that is just to ask them, hey, what could we do to get to this specific number? If you're not giving us any sort of number, it's really hard for us to figure out what to maximize. Whereas if you give us a number, we can tell you the most that we can do within that budget. And I do think that it's hard when you see these beautiful, incredible, overly elaborate suites online and you're made to assume like that's the average, and then you see the average cost of wedding invitations, which all of those statistics are a little bit skewed in different directions. But if you see that number next to that invitation that you see a lot, you kind of expect those to be similar. And that's something that we're working on as an industry, is just providing a more realistic view of what things do cost and what the kind of average suite looks like. But there are a lot of beautiful things out there and so many talented designers that if you give them, the exact budget that you want and your priorities, they're going to come up with something so beautiful and just wonderful options for you. So let me know what questions you have about wedding invitations. I hope you'll stick around and watch some of the other videos on this playlist. And I would love to teach you if you are interested in becoming an invitation designer yourself. I have lots of pricing and design courses that you can check out in the description of this video. Thanks for watching.